back to our show. You know, the value of long-term relationships, I don't think can really be understated. And when you have the amount of experiences as we do on our show and all across different industries, I think you would tend to find that most people have long-term relationships with their clients, and their clients have long-term relationships to them. But it's not just because they want them. It's because there's value in them. Matthew Royal joins us, the president and managing broker of Royal Commercial Corp., who's brought insight and innovation to the corporate real estate industry for more than 20 years with companies like Microsoft, Wall Data, Primus Knowledge Solutions, and Clearwire Corporations. Mr. Royal, how are you, my friend?
Good morning, Mr. Brescian. How are you?
I'm
good.
I am great. So I just had and I want to get into the negotiation part, because that's such a key aspect of commercial real estate.
Okay. Yeah.
But with commercial real estate and people who maybe have a business, they have growth needs. And I would think that having relationships with somebody who would be their guy on the real estate side for a business's growth is a huge piece.
It helps, and especially if you're dealing with a specific industry or a specific client and their needs. Educating your broker or your partner, your professional partner, takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And once you've got that tribal knowledge of the client, and the client has that of the broker or the professional, it just makes the next transaction that much more smooth and easy. And it's like any relationship, you work at it, and then you perfect it, and it keeps getting better and better and better. And that's clearly the way to go. Otherwise, you're just doing one-off each time.
Well, I think that what you say, the tribal knowledge, is really a key part of this, because there's an element of culture that each even individual brings to a transaction, whether it's a company or an individual buying a house, and the way they operate. And if you can get that to mesh with the way somebody else operates, as you said.
Yeah, and tie it back into negotiations, it's the same thing, because there's two distinct elements to business relationships, and again, it filters into the negotiation aspect, which is you have your economic dynamics and you have your personal or personality dynamics. Once you've connected with a professional and their personality jives with yours, you understand their economic position, their business, how it works, where their revenue is generated from. You do one transaction, then you evaluate that. And the next one, you can revisit those things, say, what has changed from the first time we've done this, and is your business model changing? And then you can actually extrapolate and keep getting the deal and transaction better, more fast, quicker, blah, blah. It just is it's a win-win for everybody.
Sure. So then when you start, okay, let's talk about then, with the negotiation part, because I guess if you're working with somebody long-term,
yes,
and you're going to understand their style of negotiation. Do they just want to get the deal done? Or is it, we are going to try to pinch every penny on this deal? And I would imagine there's two sides of that coin.
There is. And there's negotiating is more of an art than a science. And I hate to quote Donald Trump, art of the deal or whatever that was, which I've never read the book, and I don't know. But
it's always good when you can quote a title of a book.
Yeah, yes, and the author, even if you haven't read it. But anyway, the negotiations are complicated at any level, and you enter into negotiations because usually the two parties have different valuations or results from a good or a service. If you agreed, you wouldn't negotiate, and you'd pay what the asking price was, or you'd pay what the service price is, or you wouldn't negotiate for additional services for the same price. So some people don't like to negotiate for whatever reason, and they'll just say, oh, you're selling a widget and it's $10,000? Great, I'll take one. And that's that. But when you
and I guess with a widget or whatever it is, I think the part you brought up is this different valuation, and two people may value something differently. Now, that would be maybe why most people negotiate. Aren't there other people who just go in for a good deal? Look, I know it's supposed to be that price,
yeah,
but it makes them feel good, and they just like to haggle.
Yeah, they do. And as a professional, that's when we kind of look and say, hey, this is the market rate. These are the comps. This is what the market will bear. Now, when we look at the personality versus, say, we have personality dynamics and we have economic dynamics. And I'll jump kind of to the end there a little bit, but in those, to quote another famous person, whether you agree with his politics or his ideology or not, but Rumsfeld, Don Rumsfeld, the old Secretary of Defense, he had the no speech that he gave, which was, to paraphrase, we know what we know, we know what we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know. And so when you go into a negotiation, you start basically with those three parameters. First, you have your objective. You know what you know. Then you say, what's the landlord's objective? You kind of know that too, or the other party's objective. And then you come back and say, now we don't know what we don't know, which is we think we know his motivation for selling, for transacting. We know what ours is, but we also don't know what's driving that. Is it, and we enter into the personality issue. Is he or she going through a divorce, separation, illness in the family? What's their motivation for selling? Sometimes you know, sometimes you don't. The number one rule that follows that is don't assume. You know, a lot of people enter into a negotiation.
Isn't that if you assume,
yes,
to quote somebody else, it makes an ass out of you and me?
And usually it'll blow the deal up and cost you a lot of money if it doesn't. But people generally novices generally tend to create a story in their head that's like, oh, if I do this, the landlord will do that, or the other party will do that, and this is where we'll end up. Well, that's just made for TV. That doesn't really work in the real world. So when you're developing your plan and strategy, you map out your knowns. You think you knows, and then you don't knows. And then you sit down and you strategize with your professional or the other parties, partners, whoever it is, your needs to have. We need to buy it for this price, or we need it to be on this date, or we need whatever. Then there's we want to have this, which means that it's not a deal killer, but God dang it, sure be nice to have. And then there's the last one, which we sure like to have this. So that's, and then when you look at all those three elements inside the other subset of three elements, I know it gets a little complicated, but then you look and you say, what are our hard dollar negotiating points, and what are our soft cost negotiating points?
It sounds to me like what you're trying to say is you have to qualify exactly what some of these elements are that you're negotiating on.
Absolutely.
Because I imagine you could go in very emotionally and all of a sudden it's like, well, we just want it. Okay, but does it really meet these criteria?
Yeah.
And I would imagine that, actually qualifying what you're going after,
correct,
is what allows you to, the subsets or whatnot.
Yeah. You've clearly, as the purchaser, identified, and actually as the seller as well, you've identified the need to transact or to acquire or to divest. I mean, you've made that conscious decision. That's why you're at this point. You have your bottom number, and the other fella has his top number, and the broker or the professional, whether it's an attorney, real estate agent, broker, whatever, they're the ones going to help you pilot to that mid gap. When we look at, like on a residential side, you look at that and say, well, we have the purchase price of the home, and then if it goes too soon, usually people go, damn, I paid too much, or, oh, but then that's the hard dollar. Then there's the soft cost savings, the soft cost to the transaction, where it's like, we really want to keep the lawnmower, or we want to keep the washer and dryer. Or in a commercial transaction, it's like, well, we want you to do some tenant improvement allowance for us. We want you to build this wall and paint it and put some carpet in. And that's the buyer inures the benefit without having to pay out of their pocket. So technically a soft cost savings. Or whether it's a janitorial service provider where this is their scope of work for blank dollars, you get additional services for the same dollars. That's a soft cost savings. So when you're mapping out your strategy for negotiating, whether it's for a car, a chainsaw, a $10 million property, whatever, you need to map out where you kind of want to be, how you're going to get there, and just asking for something, just saying, because I think so, or I want it this way, is not going to help you prevail in your negotiations. In my experience, if you have a plausible reason, a business reason, a logical reason for asking for a reduction, a soft cost term savings, or some change that the landlord or the other party did not intend to do, if you have a viable justification for that, 9 out of 10 times you'll prevail if it's within reason. But that gives the other party time to evaluate their objectives, what they wanted to get out of it, and meet you halfway on that.
So we're here with Matthew Royal, President and Managing Broker with Royal Commercial Corporation. So Matthew, what I hear you kind of saying, though, is you have to figure out reasons by which you should want, not just you want them for whatever reason you have, but then when you're going to present your reason for wanting them, you need a more substantiated method.
Yeah, when the landlord says, we want $20 a square foot and the triple nets on this property are $6. Well, the tenant says, well, I don't want to pay $20. It's like, well, we all understand that. That's a given.
I want to pay $0.
Yeah.
I would like you to give it to me.
I want it to be $15. And we say, okay, so let's figure out the gross lease value and the delta, and we're asking landlord to give up, $200,000. We need to justify why we need that. Well, I don't want to pay it. Well, let's do a market comp to see where we're at. Because you can't just go in, your children will do that and say, well, I want this. Why? Well, because it's promoted so well and it's got pretty colors. Well, and the parents' last-ditch effort is because I said so.
Right.
Well, that's not a negotiation.
Well, it's a good thing when you have your kids, you don't have to negotiate, right? And
that's why you say
at some point in time, you're like, oh, well, you're 2 and I'm older, so you just don't get this. Matt, we do have to go to break. I know we wanted to talk a little bit about how to plan, but it sounds to me like, really understanding and qualifying what you want, and then creating, I would guess, some type of hierarchy of needs is a good way to go.
Correct, and a justification for those. And then that allows the purchaser to decide whether that's a good deal for them or not, whether they walk, whether they keep looking. It just solidifies what you're going to end up with at the end.
Sure. Well, Matt, thanks so much for joining us. We do have to go to break. Again, Matthew Royal, President and Managing Broker with Royal Commercial Corporation. When we come back, we're going to stick on the topic of real estate with David Bell from RE/MAX, our resident RE/MAX Hall of Famer. We'll be right back after this break.